Well, hell. I'm just going to sign into chat. Hooray! That actually worked. Kind of useful. Okay, another quick stream now that I can actually see the chat. And I figured it'd be useful to just go over the interface between Houdini and Unreal Engine. So one thing that you'll probably see differently here is that some of these things are procedurally generated in Unreal Engine. Some of them are using features like spline mesh components. Some are using PCG graph, but some of them are also using Houdini graphs. Now, one of the things that I think it's important to understand is that when we're talking about using Houdini in Unreal Engine, it's actually a two-way thing. And it's because of this thing called Houdini Engine. And so the reason why it's important is that you can actually get data from Unreal Engine into Houdini. And if you think about it, here's a tool I've made that basically spawns things on the Unreal Engine landscape from Houdini. But it means that I can then paint the details. So if we go to landscape mode, I can actually paint with a different value. And when we force the update in Houdini, currently it's not connected. So if we connect our session, okay, create session. Why is that failing? Let's restart session and see if that works. It's probably because Houdini's failing to log in or something. Let's just quit it and see if it'll start from Unreal Engine. It is a little bit picky. There we go. So what should happen now is, once it's actually decided to mind you, I might need to, on the landscape, which landscape is this? So this particular landscape is this guy here, which I've usefully called something. So what it does, it uses this landscape scatter tool. Now, normally when you edit it, one of the things I've noticed is that you need to sort of force it to recook sometimes. Ooh. Oop. Well, that didn't go the way I expected. Let's see if it rebuilds. not. It could be they have edited the actual graph later on somewhere else, which would be bad. So let's have a look. Right. It's oh, okay. It could be that as well. I did have it off in real time, so no, it's definitely something in the graph. So let's open up Houdini. Wonder if it's just the session itself. Need to actually see the graph in Houdini to see if I've managed to mess it up somehow. So anyway, while that's loading, it's bound the system up. Okay, we'll wait for it. It's not the fastest PC in the world, to be fair. Now there's interesting. So it looks like... yeah, that's alright. Okay, so let's open Houdini up. So what we're looking at is the landscape scatter tool. So, ooh, that's definitely doing some weird stuff. But yeah, okay. Oh, this is the actual... right. Well, that's not the best in the world, is it? Tell you what I'll do. Let's... unsync that. Close the sync session. So that's the sort of live version of Houdini. If you want to actually like edit things live, you can session sync. Obviously, because it's not generating geometry, there's something wrong with the Houdini engine connection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just launch Houdini. And make sure our parameters are correct. Because theoretically the landscape scatter tool should just allow us to pick a landscape which we've done, pick a geometry which is the cube, and there should be a mask variable somewhere. Ah, there we go. That's why it's wrong. Why is that not? Ah, there we go. Let's connect it. It failed to launch. Landscape scatter tool. So let's just make sure it works if we apply that. That appears to do what we expect. Okay, so that does what we expect. And in our Unreal Engine, back in Unreal Engine, see, we're painting on the grass layer. I wonder if it's that. I wonder if you have to save in landscape mode. Right, okay. Let's try restarting it. There we go. I think we're back. And then force it to recook. No. And then it's restarted. That. Ah, we're back again. Wow, that took a while. So anyway, now we should be able to paint on the landscape. We can Alt. Is it Alt? No, it's Shift, is it? Yeah. We can Shift paint. And then paint with pink over here. shift paint that way. And then go back to selection mode in landscape. Let's add one to that just to force it to recook. Ooh, no it didn't. Yeah, I get it. So what's actually happening is the issue. When you select these, essentially it restarts all of the parameters. And by default, it's looking for a mask layer. Let's just try this. On the landscape, let's, we've got a material on the landscape. Where is it? Let's make a copy of that and make a green. And take the color out of that into there and rename that layer to mask. So they're all weight blended layers. And it's all going into base color, so that should be all right. So we've created a mask layer here. Now we need to add a, was it weight blended? Yeah, I think it was a weight blended layer. And then we can paint with mask. Come out of that and see if we can get the landscape scatter tool to redo. Oh, okay. That weren't what we were expecting. Okay, maybe I called it. Maybe it's case sensitive. So if we set this to grass, what it'll do is only spawn on the pink. And you see that it starts doing a drop down. If we set it to mask, it'll only spawn on the mask layer. And then if we spawn on the, what do we call it? Do we call it base? It'll spawn on everything else. So essentially you can paint where you want things to appear. And obviously I've just spawned a whole bunch of instances and stuff, but you kind of get it. So just be aware, if you get a problem with the session, you can kind of just restart it. I think you have to have Houdini up and running, but maybe not. But the point is you can bake out the content once you've got it working the way you want. But let's just go through what's actually happening in this tool so you understand what's going on here. If I go back to Houdini, the landscape scatter tool itself, if we look at the graph for it, it's got these inputs. One is the input for the landscape, and the other one is the input for the thing to scatter. And what we're actually doing is just using this height field scatter node. So the reason why it's got these exclamation points in is that by default, your landscape scatter node won't have any input. So what we could do is we could feed it in these two things and that error goes away. So if you need to test whether your actual graph works in Houdini, you can just feed it inputs, right? Feed it a height field. But what's actually happening in Unreal Engine is that when Unreal Engine runs this tool, it's actually looking for those input parameters in these Houdini inputs. So essentially, and I'll show you how to do this in a second, you can feed Unreal Engine content through Houdini Engine for Unreal into Houdini. So essentially what it does a process called marshalling, where it takes the data that you've got in Unreal Engine and forms it into a Houdini version, a Houdiniized version, I suppose. One thing I will do, let's go back to the landscape. Where are we? Where's the landscape here? And go to my material and change that to mask with a lower. Okay. So that should in theory work now, I suppose. Let's try it. Okay. And then landscape scatter tool. Let's go for grass. Let's go for mask. Okay. Let's browse to that. Let's delete that. Can you delete that? Clear layer. Ooh. Rebuild materials. Okay. I'm just trying to figure out how to rename this to lowercase m because I think it's case sensitive. But whatever. It's not that big of a deal. So we'll just paint with that. With that mask. So we should be able to come back to Houdini's landscape scatter tool. Choose the mask layer. It's not painting into that mask when it does it there. I wonder if it's... Let's just recook. There we go. Okay, so some data was cached somewhere, obviously. You get the point though, right? Like, you can essentially apply a mask to your Houdini terrain layers. Now, this is the thing that they're going to add in Unreal Engine PCG graph in 5.5, so it's not a unique feature so much, but, you know, it is kind of useful. So let's just quickly go through creating a thing in Houdini, or rather in Unreal Engine, that then uses Houdini. So if I go back to Houdini itself, I'll show you some of these other tools I did sort of. So you can really easily create new tools in Houdini for Unreal Engine that take Unreal Engine content in. So a good example here is that I did a test thing where you can take in a spline. Now this one's a little bit more messy because I was just playing with things, but essentially there's this a node in Houdini called Object Merge, and that Object Merge node, if we come back to the top level and have a look at the parameters, you can see there's this thing called Object Path, and essentially that Object Path back in Unreal Engine, where is my, I think it's spline tester, this guy here. I was trying to recreate our spline mesh thing for Houdini. So your input in Houdini essentially looks like this, right? A parameter in Unreal Engine. And in this particular case, I've given it the location of an actor. So essentially we can clear selection, and then we could start selecting a blueprint with a spline. I'm just going to undo that. Well, I can't undo that. That's good. Where have we got something with a spline? Did I copy it? Yeah, I did. So that spline tester, what we can do is we can start selecting, and then we select an Unreal object that's got a spline associated with it and tell it to use current. Give it a second to cook the content. Oh, right. Okay. Well, that wasn't quite correct, was it? Can I undo that? What was it called? Not that. Definitely not that. Ah, there we go. BP spline tester. And what we want to do is start selection, select that BP spline tester, use current. And so what's actually happening here is that graph, when you give it an input, so by default, when Houdini sees that you've selected a spline, an actor, sorry, with a spline component, it knows that it can pass it through into Houdini. So Houdini Engine is essentially parsing that and passing it into this object one variable. And so object one is treated as a spline, right? It's basically treated as a set of curve segments. And then we use an end node to give it, to like actually make it into a proper curve. I've put a switch node in here so that I can choose either using a circle as a curve or using the input as a curve, just so I can test things. And then it's sweeping that curve and choosing whether to output the sweep or not. The sweep is basically just, if we go back to Unreal Engine for a second, there's lots of swapping monitors. The sweep is essentially, so let's just select that input. Where are we? One in the inputs. Oh. So the sweep is essentially creating this tube here, right? And the tube is using this radius value. So you can see here, if I set it to 1, say it's going to be a bit of a chunkier tube. So that just is a way of testing whether you're outputting like content along the curve that you're expecting, right? So along the spline. So I could, is it that one that toggles it on and off? Yeah. So I can disable just the spline content, you know, like just that sweep node. I can disable the sweep node by just changing this switch value, and that's what that enable property is. So otherwise, what we're doing is we're saying, take the input of our spline curve, resample it. So resampling essentially takes an input curve and inputs a bunch of points at a certain distance along it. So if you look at the actual properties of that, we can essentially say put a point every, you know, in this case 0.61 units, and then we take the second input, which is this subnetwork input 1. So the object merge node is one way of getting things into a Houdini graph. The other way of doing it is just have the graph as an input, right? So have an input on the graph, and what we're doing is we're treating that as an object. We're transforming it slightly, just because I realized it was like a little bit in the ground. We're calling facet on it again, just because the lighting was looking a bit weird. And this is essentially the wall segment for that particular like spline wall part. And then we're just merging those meshes together if the switch decides to do the merge or not. So the switch node is just a way of doing an optional, like you either do the line of input on one side or the line of input on the other side. And I've, in the interface here, if we come to the parameters, my voice is going, I've set them as, they're basically just Booleans, right? And I've set them as toggles. So there's, where is it? Somewhere in here? There's a checkbox somewhere to say, make it a toggle. Where is it? Oh, there you go. Yeah, you use the drop down to select it of type toggle. So essentially what I've done is I've made an input that's one of those object merge nodes, another input on the actual node itself. If we look at, trying to remember where it is, if you go to assets, edit asset properties, and you can see the number of parameters, input output, there we go. We can say that it's got one input. Basic, yeah, okay. So the way you add inputs, like one of these sort of node inputs, is that you come to the parameters of the particular node that you want, and you set its maximum number of inputs and minimum number. So essentially this is saying this object has one input. And what essentially that does is it provides this one subnetwork input. So we could call that anything we wanted. So essentially let's make that again. If we come in here, we do a new geometry. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a, let's say, circle. Let's say it's polygons. I don't know whether polygons will work for this, but let's try it. And sweep that. Sweep that curve. And then the sweep itself should be set to something like round tube. a second. Let's stop previewing that. Maybe we need to set this to primitive. Did I choose the correct plane? I did not, clearly. There we go. Something a bit more like it. So essentially we've got this node thing. Here's another little trick. So we've created this geometry. Let's call that sweep spline. Okay, so I found this from one of the guys at Side Effects the other day. If you select this node, you can click on the little create subnetwork, and it creates a subnet. If we then go to create digital asset, and we call it sweep spline, and get rid of my name and the version number and just call it sweep spline for now, and we save it to our simple HDA test directory, sweep spline. We don't want the type because we bored of that. Okay, so sweep spline HDA in C, create it. And you'll see that it adds minimum and maximum number of inputs. So what we want is we want to actually make this expose a bunch of parameters on our sweep, right? So the actual sweep spline HDA is this graph here. And by default, it's going to take whatever's on node input 1 and it's going to sweep it. So what we want to do is we want to grab some of these properties here, surface types and whatever. Radius is good. Make sure we've got end caps maybe. We'll probably want to grab hold of scale ramp maybe. And apply scale along curve. Hopefully that should give us a bunch of, yeah, see, that'll copy the whole thing. If we grab that and put this in here, it'll create a ramp editor for us. Let's just apply that for now. So the actual node itself, right, the graph is going to take an input wherever that's defined, treat it like a curve, sweep it with our settings, and then output the geometry. And we've tested it by feeding it a circle, and look, we get a swept circle. So theoretically, we can take this HDA, right, the one that's doing the graph here, and we can feed it as an input some curve, right? So basically a spline in Unreal Engine. And it should just sweep it. So let's just asset, save asset. We need to select that one. Asset, save asset, sweep spline. So back in Unreal Engine, let us go to content. Let's go to go for PCG for now. Import our sweep spline. So what this will do is it'll create a HDA. Sorry, it'll create a tool that we can feed it anything with a spline, and it'll sweep that spline and output the content for it. But what you'll see here is that the input node allows us to add something. So what we should do is we should add, we should add, we need to set it to world import. So basically import from this current scene. And we need to start selection, choose that guy, use current. And so what should happen is that that spline should now be swept. Now you'll see that there's actually an issue here that I came across before when I was first doing this stuff. If we just increase our radius for a second, so take it up to like 6-ish, you'll see that it's kind of squashed, but it's basically mirroring that spline there. So basically it's just going to take an input spline actor and sweep the node with it. And the reason why it's collapsing like that is because back in the Houdini graph, the sweep node, there is a value somewhere on there. I wonder if it's apply scale along curve. Or is it stretch around turns? Could be that. Let's see if that was it. No, it probably wasn't that. It might be scale along curve, which we did actually make available. It's because basically the normal of the curve isn't set correctly, and I did fix this on a previous, like my other spline curve, so I've definitely done it somewhere. But for the life of me, I can't remember. Let's have a look. Spline test. No, that's just copying a thing along a spline. Oh, there's the sweep node. It could be that, the up vector. In the construction. So let's expose that in the other one. Oops, go back up one. Edit parameter interface. Go back down one in the construction. Oh, it's this. Yeah, it's this property here. Pretty sure it is. So if we just switch that off. Apply, accept. And then assets, save asset, sweep spline. I'm relatively sure that's what the problem is. So back in Unreal Engine, we just recook. And hopefully that's fixed it. It did not fix it. It's one of those properties. And a scale along curve is... because if we look at it as a box, you can see that the dimensions are squished, which is not what we want. I am going to get to the bottom of this. In fact, let's just go back to the parameter interface, grab our sweep node and grab this. And tangent type. Apply, accept. So that's pretty much got all of them, I think. And then assets, save asset, sweep spline again. Back in Unreal Engine, let's recook that guy. And then set those properties. Why is that not showing those values? Okay, I get it. I know why it's not showing those. So, come back into Houdini. The edit parameter interface for what we're doing shouldn't be here. This is not the one we want. What we want is the assets, edit asset properties. And you see that it's not got all of those parameters we're adding, which is why. Let's just go back and remove them from here. So it's all of those, right? Gone. Scale along curve. Anyway, point being, assets, edit asset properties. Come in here, go to your construction, add them from there. So you have to watch out for that when you're editing the actual asset. Go to assets, edit asset properties. What a pain. So frankly, now when we come in and recook, we should start seeing a bunch of those parameters show up. But we don't, so maybe we need to rebuild. Yeah, okay. There we go. Ooh. Now that is not what I expected. I mean, it's cool looking and all, but... Right. radius down a bit. Oh, of course, yeah, it's sweeping the curve and the mesh. Of course. So what's actually happening here is that we're feeding an object, right? So essentially the Houdini input is where is it? Is this BP wall spline, which isn't just a spline, it's also a mesh, right? Because the mesh is spawned along the spline. So what it's doing is it's combining both of those into a set of geometry and then sweeping everything it sees. So it's actually transforming all of the geometry as well. So what we could do is we could select that wall spline, and we can just select nothing in there. So we only have the spline, and then this Houdini version of it then only sees the spline, and the sweep spline tool sweeps it. So what we could do is we could use the original position of that spline. There's a keep transform somewhere in there. I wish it wouldn't zoom in and out of the ramp. Where are we? You see this property keep world transform? So that uses the input points of that original spline and sweeps them with a curve. Hello. Sorry, I wasn't watching chat. I'm glad it's working though. So yeah, we're now actually sweeping the bloody spline properly, which is useful. That means that you can come in here and edit the spline as you would with anything else, and Houdini will track the original transforms of it all. So in that way, you've kind of got the best of both worlds, right? You've got the Unreal Engine version, you've got the Houdini version, kind of using it as input. Hey, how are you doing? We're messing around with some Unreal Engine Houdini stuff. Not too bad, you know, the usual. Doing some game dev stuff, doing some procedural generation. What the hell is that? I have no idea what that is. I think it's associated with this guy here. So yeah, the landscape is the same kind of deal, right? Going back to Houdini. If we want to input a landscape where essentially we can do another geometry here. And let's call this landscape modify. And if we take a height field, let's just get rid of that other one first. Height field's just you know, like a set of values going up and down. Scrape. I'm not sure what scrape is. But hello. Good to see you. So yeah, height field, let's do height. Oh, nope, that's not what I wanted. Height. Ooh. Height field. What we got? We could noise it, I suppose. Sharpen, erode. Pattern. What's that then? What does that do? Well, that's different. So again, we're just going to take this guy and we're going to go create a subnetwork. Where is it again? Create digital asset. Call this height pattern. Get it made in my name. No version. Save to. Assets. Don't add a category. Create. And in this particular case, what do we want? What do we want to expose? Oh. I have no idea what any of these do. Scale, center, shape size, randomness. Basically, I'm just, copying everything. It should do us. Let's see what inputs we... Basic. We want minimum 1 input, maximum 1 input. That's all right. Apply, accept. So we've created this asset. Now we can save height field pattern. Import that into Unreal Engine. So what we want to do is we want to take one of these height fields. Let's just grab this. Where are we? Take this guy and Alt drag it so that it creates a copy. Oh, that's different. It didn't. I'm sure I've done that before. No. No, that's weird. Can we duplicate? That is very strange. Let's just create a new landscape solid. New. We want a small one. Let's make a 2x2. And put it somewhere over there. And create it. It's laggy, yeah. It's a little bit. We're just testing there. It's fine. Okay, we've got our new landscape. What we're going to do is we're going to take our height pattern. So come out of landscape mode. Take our height pattern. Finish cooking with errors. Interesting. What did we just call this landscape? This is landscape 2. Let's rename that. Rename landscape pattern. So height pattern is going to use, change it to world geometry, start selecting that guy, use current, and now it applies our pattern to our landscape. And we can start twiddling with those values. Like steps. No. Ramp. It's not very good ramp, but still. Stripes. Maybe our size is a little bit too big. There we go. So let's go to stars again. You get the point, right? So basically you can feed, height fields from landscapes into Houdini and do stuff with them. Ooh. Don't think we want to multiply. Subtract. Don't think we want to subtract either. Blend. That's more like it. Blending's good. Scale. Can we do 2? We can. Let's see if our cells. Ooh, that's interesting. Nope. Go to 1. Ooh, I like that. So yeah, you kind of get the point, right? We can start doing fun things like painting the terrain and what have you. Blur. Bit too much. Ooh, I like that. Yeah. Size. No, not 80. 20. guess we'll do a live demo of this. Yeah, well, there you go. Anyway, we are